I'm just a grandmother who once thought the worst thing that could happen was growing old alone. But that day when he hit me in front of my grandchildren was when I realized being alone isn't the worst thing. Being invisible is. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day meant for lemonade laughter and grandkids running barefoot through the grass. And for the first time in what felt like ages, my 2 grandbabies were in my living room. Anna and Jonah, 5 and 7. Their eyes sparkled like little suns. Their laughter filled the quiet cracks in my house, the ones he had carved over decades of silence. I had spent all morning preparing their favorite banana muffins, juice boxes in the fridge, cartoons queued up, fresh sheets in the guest room. I even lit that lavender candle he hated just to feel like the house was mine again. When he walked in, I knew something was wrong. His shoulders were tense. His brow furrowed. That smell of beer not strong, but there clung to his clothes like warning signs. I smiled, trying to meet tension with warmth. "The kids are here. I made your favorite stew." And that's when it happened. He didn't speak. He didn't shout. He just slapped the tray from my hands. The crash startled Anna. Jonah froze, and then with venom in his voice, he snapped. "You lit that candle again? I told you not to." And before I could even answer, his hand struck my cheek. It was silent, except for the sound of the tray spinning, the clink of metal against tile, the soft, muffled gasp of a child too young to understand, but too old to forget. I looked up, not at him, but at Anna and Jonah. Their eyes were wide, shaking. Anna clutched her juice box so tightly it cracked, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not out of rage, not out of fear, but out of a pain that ran deeper than bones. A pain that screamed, "No more." I didn't speak. I stood, slowly, quietly, and with the weight of every bruise he left hidden beneath sleeves and smiles, I picked up the tray and walked away. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling, not because of what he did, but because of what they saw. My grandchildren saw me hurt and do nothing. I thought about my daughter, how she trusted me to keep them safe, how I had once promised her with tears in my eyes that they would never see what she saw. And now I had broken that promise. But that moment, the moment his hand met my face in front of them, it didn't break me. It woke me up. Because that's the thing about rock bottom, it's solid. And from there, you can finally push off. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I didn't want to sleep. Sleep meant dreams. And dreams meant that moment replaying again and again. His hand, their faces, my silence. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. There it was, faint but visible, a bruise blooming like a storm cloud on my left cheek. I touched it gently, then turned my face slightly, just as I had done for years. Only this time, I wasn't trying to hide it. I was staring at it, like it was a message etched into my skin. "You let this happen," I whispered to myself. And now they saw it. Downstairs, the house was still. No shouting, no footsteps. Just that awful stretching quiet that always came after a storm. He had left early for work, left without a word, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. And for the first time, I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. I packed the kids' lunches, kissed their foreheads, walked them to the door. Jonah looked up at me with those big, worried eyes and said, "Grandma, are you okay?" I wanted to say, of course, but I didn't. I knelt down and said, "Do you remember what I told you about being brave?" He nodded slowly. "Well," I whispered, "I think it's Grandma's turn to be brave now." After they left, I called my daughter. It rang 6 times. Voicemail. I tried again. This time she picked up. Her voice was rushed, tired. "Hey, Mom, everything okay? The kids didn't forget anything, did they?" I almost said no. Almost. But I didn't. I said, "He hit me, in front of them." Silence. Not a shocked silence. A knowing silence. Then I heard her sigh. The kind of sigh that carries years of suppressed truth. "I always wondered if you stayed quiet because of me." I did. I said softly, but not anymore. That afternoon, she came over. Alone. We sat at the kitchen table like two women carrying the same wound just decades apart. She looked at my bruise, then back at me. It's not just a bruise, Mom. It's a wake-up call. We talked for hours. About the nights she remembered hiding in the closet as a child. About the way I used to tell her your daddy's just tired. About the lies we told ourselves to survive. And then she said something I'll never forget. If you don't leave him, Mom, they'll grow up thinking this is what love looks like. That night, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents, savings, keys, a folder labeled "What If?" I started planning, not running. Planning, because I had seen what staying silent had done to me. And now, I had seen what it was doing to them. He may have thought I'd never leave, but he had forgotten one thing. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a grandmother. And grandmothers, we protect, even if it means burning down everything we once built with our bare hands. I remember the first time he hit me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even loud. It was during our second year of marriage. I had overcooked the rice. Just rice. He said, "You're useless sometimes." Then slapped my wrist hard enough to knock the spoon out of my hand. He didn't apologize. He didn't have to, because the next day he brought home flowers. And that's how it began. I was 24. Too young to know what manipulation felt like. Too proud to tell my mother. Too hopeful to believe it would continue. But it did. Oh, it did. He never left bruises at first, just bruised moments. The words, the glares, the slammed doors. The way he'd say, "You're lucky I put up with you." The way I started believing he was right. Over time, I became smaller, quieter, more obedient. Because when love turns into fear, you forget what normal is. When the kids came, things got harder. He'd snap at them, criticize every detail, then demand their love like nothing happened. I tried to shield them, tried to be the warmth in the cold. But I see now that children don't just learn what we teach them. They learn what we tolerate. After they left home, I thought things would ease. But without anyone else in the house, the silence got louder. His moods were constant shadows. My joy became rationed. My purpose unclear. I was no longer a mother raising children. I was a woman trapped in a cage she helped build bar by bar, excuse by excuse. But then Anna and Jonah were born, and suddenly my life had light again. Their little hands, their drawings, their stories. They made me feel alive in ways he never could. That's why what happened that Sunday was so shattering. Because they saw it. They saw him. But worse. They saw me. The broken version. The silent version. The version that survived by staying small. I sat by the window that night, staring out at the stars, wondering if my mother had felt the same way. Wondering how many women sit in the same spot, wrapping shame around themselves like a blanket. And then I whispered aloud, "No more," because I had loved him. But I loved them more. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had a decision. And that was the first step out of the cage. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the lights off the clock ticking so loudly it felt like thunder in my chest. Every second was a memory. Every tick a reminder of how long I had endured this silence. That morning, I made breakfast like I always did, scrambled eggs, toast coffee. He came downstairs like nothing had happened the day before. As if he hadn't struck me. As if our grandchildren hadn't seen it. He sat down at the table, scrolled through his phone, and muttered, "Where's the salt?" And in that moment, something inside me broke. Or maybe it unlocked. I looked at him not like a wife looks at her husband, but like a woman who's finally woken up from a long nightmare. And I said it, calm, steady, and clear. "You don't get to speak to me like that anymore." His eyes snapped up, confused, annoyed. "Excuse me." I stood up, took the salt, and placed it on the table with the softest smile I could manage. "You heard me." He laughed at first. A low, bitter laugh like I'd told a joke in poor taste. Then he raised his voice, started into one of his tirades. But something had changed. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't shrinking. I was still. That day I called Anna. I told her everything. Not the sugar-coated version, not the excuses. Everything. she cried. She said, "Grandma, I didn't know. I didn't see it. I should have seen it." But how could she? I'd hidden it behind birthday cakes and polite smiles. That's what we do, isn't it? We women, we hide our bruises in casseroles and folded laundry, Anna told Jonah. They came that weekend. I watched as my son, my grown son, looked at his father not with respect, but with disappointment, with fury, with pain. Jonah didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just said, "You raised us better than this. Or maybe Mom did it alone." For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone in the truth. And you know what? That made me brave. I started writing everything down. Every incident, every word, every silent scream I'd swallowed for decades. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed record. I needed to see it all. To name it. To no longer gaslight myself into thinking I was overreacting. The next Sunday, he tried to pretend again. He asked if I was going to church. I said no. He asked if I'd make lunch. I said no. And when he raised his voice again, I stood up. I looked him in the eyes and said, "You can yell all you want, but I won't be here to hear it much longer." That night, I made a list. What I needed to pack. What accounts I had access to. What documents were in my name. It wasn't perfect. It was terrifying. But it was mine. My beginning. My second act. Because the woman who once whispered no more was now preparing to walk. And this time, she wouldn't look back. I used to think leaving would be a dramatic, loud moment. Like in the movies. You slam the door, throw a suitcase in the back of a car, and never look back. But the truth is, when you've been in silence for too long, your exit becomes a whisper. Not for him, but for yourself. It was a Wednesday morning when I finally did it. I woke up early, like I always did. But instead of going to the kitchen, I went to the closet. And I packed 2 suitcases, one with clothes, the other with photo albums, because even after everything, the memories of my children, my grandchildren, were sacred to me. I left the wedding photo. I didn't need a reminder of the lie that started it all. He didn't even notice. He was in the backyard yelling at a tree trimmer for being late, still shouting at the world as if it owed him something. I walked right past the front porch, stepped into Anna's car, and never turned back. She held my hand the whole drive, didn't say a word for the first 20 minutes. And then she whispered, "Grandma, I'm proud of you." I burst into tears because for the first time in my life, someone said they were proud of me, not for staying, not for enduring, not for being strong in silence, but for leaving. The first few days at Anna's were strange. Her guest room was small but warm. She made me tea every evening like I used to make her when she was little. But I didn't feel like a grandmother anymore. I felt like a ghost of myself wandering between shame and relief. Was I really free? Was this really happening? On the 3rd night, I dreamt I was back in that kitchen. He was sitting there, and I was serving him eggs again. Only this time, I looked down and I was invisible. Not in the magical sense, but in the real sense. The sense that every woman who's ever been ignored, dismissed, or spoken over knows all too well. I woke up with tears in my eyes, but something had shifted. I was out. I was free. And now I had to learn how to live again. Anna took me to a small cafe the next day. She introduced me to a friend of hers, a woman named Claire. Claire was in her late 60s, silver-haired and sharp-tongued in the best way. She'd left her husband a decade ago. Said she got tired of pretending beige was her favorite color. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You think your life is over, don't you? That this is the end? Well, darling, the end was living with someone who made you feel small. This is the beginning." That night, I wrote in a journal. Today, I met someone who reminded me that I still exist. I hadn't written that sentence in over 40 years. I exist. Not as a mother, not as a wife, but as me. The next morning, I went outside and sat on Anna's porch. The sun hit my face warm and soft. And for the first time in years, I closed my eyes and smiled. Not for show, not for anyone, just for myself. There's something strange about starting over in your 70s. You wake up in a new bed, in a new room, with silence all around. And for once, it's not threatening. It's not the silence of fear. It's the silence of possibility. But I wasn't used to possibility. I was used to permission. For decades, everything I did was preceded by a question. Is it okay if I... Do you mind if I didn't even realize I was asking to exist. That morning, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't met in years. Her name was Evelyn. It sounds silly, doesn't it? To forget your own name? But when you've been called mom, grandma, or worse, useless, too emotional a burden, you begin to lose the word that once made you you. So I stood in front of that mirror and said it out loud, "My name is Evelyn." And then I said it again and again, until my reflection started to believe it too. Anna had been telling me I needed to see someone, a therapist. I laughed the first few times, told her back in my day, we just swallowed it down and carried on. But she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "That's exactly why I want you to go. You don't have to carry it anymore." So I did. Her name was Janine. She had kind eyes and a voice that didn't rush. She asked me about my marriage, my children, my past. And when I told her about the day I was hit in front of my grandkids, her eyes didn't widen in shock. She didn't gasp or look away. She nodded softly and said, "You didn't deserve that, and you are not what happened to you." That sentence echoed in my chest for days. I'm not what happened to me. Not the screaming, not the broken dishes, not the betrayal, not the years of being told I was too much and not enough in the same breath. I'm Evelyn. I began doing small things for myself. I bought a red scarf. I always loved red, but he used to say it was too loud for someone my age. I wore it proudly on a walk with Anna. And when someone smiled and said, "You look lovely in that color," I didn't shrink. I smiled back. One day, Anna brought out a box from the attic. "Your things," she said. Inside were old journals, photo frames, postcards I had written but never sent. And tucked at the bottom was a birthday card I had made for myself on my 60th. It read, "To me, you are still here. You are still standing. And maybe, just maybe, this next chapter will be yours." I had forgotten that Evelyn ever wrote that. But now I was ready to finish the chapter. Later that night, I sat on the porch again. The stars were out. I whispered, "I don't want to survive anymore. I want to live." And I meant it, because finally I wasn't just a woman who had endured. I was a woman who had risen. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked into the grocery store by myself. No list from anyone. No one waiting in the car. No one criticizing what I bought. Just me. It might not sound like much, but for someone who had spent decades asking for permission, it was a small act of revolution. I wandered the aisles slowly, letting my fingers brush against the cans, the boxes, the colors. And then I heard it. "Isn't that Evelyn Carter?" Two women stood near the produce section whispering. I turned my head instinctively, preparing to shrink. But not this time. One of them, Martha, walked over. She looked unsure, as if she didn't know whether to hug me or pity me. "We heard about, what happened," she said, eyes darting. "Are you all right?" I looked at her, at the concern wrapped in gossip, at the curiosity masked as kindness. And I smiled not out of politeness, but out of power. "I'm not just all right," I said. "I'm finally free." She blinked, and for a second, I saw something shift behind her eyes. Envy, admiration, fear, maybe all of it. Because when a woman dares to rise, even after being shattered, it frightens those still holding their own broken pieces in silence. As I walked away, a young cashier smiled at me. "That scarf looks amazing on you," she said. "Thanks," I replied. "It feels like a part of me that got buried." "Glad it found its way back," she said, ringing up my red apples and chamomile tea. I returned to Anna's house bags in hand, and heart a little lighter. She noticed the change instantly. "You seem taller," she joked. "I think I am," I laughed. "Or maybe the weight I used to carry just isn't there anymore." That night, I sat down and wrote something in my old journal. "Dear Evelyn, today you didn't just buy groceries. You bought your independence. You bought your name back. You bought silence and filled it with your own voice." I closed the book and exhaled deeply. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen by myself. It was 2 weeks after I moved in with Anna. 2 quiet, healing weeks where I learned how to breathe without waiting for the next cruel word. the next slammed door, the next cold silence from a man who once promised to protect me. And then the phone rang. Anna handed it to me. She didn't look thrilled. Her lips were tight, her eyes hesitant. "It's Dad," she said flatly. "He wants to talk to you." My fingers curled around the phone like it was a blade. I didn't say anything right away, just looked at her. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," I replied, but something in me needed to hear what he would say. I pressed the phone to my ear. "Hello." His voice, still deep still, that same tone that used to make me flinch, came through, though not as strong. "Evelyn? I didn't mean for it to happen this way." What way was that exactly? Was it the way he beat me in front of our grandchildren? Or the way he sold our house without telling me? Or maybe the way he tried to erase me while still needing me to fold his laundry and fill his prescription? I didn't say any of that. Not yet. "You betrayed me?" I said, my voice steady. "Not just once. For years." I was angry. I was under pressure. "The house. You sold our house, Charles. Our home. You sold me." There was a long silence. Then came the weak plea. "Come back, Evelyn. Let's fix this." I stared out the window. The sky outside was golden. It looked like freedom. Fix what I asked. The bruises. The silence. The years I gave up everything for you and got treated like a ghost in return. "You're my wife." "Not anymore." My voice didn't shake. For once, it was his voice that cracked. "You're serious?" "Yes," I said, eyes sharp. This is me finally being serious. And then the thing he never expected. "I'm going to divorce you, Charles." He sputtered. "Don't be ridiculous. You're too old to..." Too old to what, live, be free, make my own choices. He didn't have a reply, just breath thick with panic. "Goodbye," I whispered. "Wait, Evelyn." But I had already ended the call. And it felt like slicing a chain off my ankle. Anna walked over. "You okay?" I nodded. I think I just bought myself a second life, and then I said it out loud just to hear it. "I'm going to be divorced." Finally, she hugged me so tightly I thought I'd cry. But I didn't cry. Not then. I smiled, because the woman who used to tremble at his voice had just found her own. Divorce at 71. It sounded ridiculous to some, heroic to others, but to me, it sounded like freedom. A word I had forgotten how to pronounce, let alone live. Anna helped me find a lawyer. A kind woman named Carla, who wore bright lipstick and had the fiercest look in her eyes when I told her what had happened. "He hit you in front of your grandchildren. He sold the house behind your back. Let's get you everything you deserve." The process was slower than I liked. There were forms, hearings, meetings I didn't understand, but I went to every single one. With my chin up, my heart guarded, and my spirit sharper than ever. Charles didn't go down without a fight. He tried to claim I was mentally unstable. He tried to freeze joint accounts. He even told the court I'd abandoned him. Imagine that. The man who silenced me for 40 years now trying to play the victim. But Carla came prepared. Photos, testimonies, statements from Anna. Even from the neighbors. "Your Honor," she said. This woman was not just beaten. She was erased. Let's give her voice back. And for the first time in that sterile courtroom, I felt seen. Not as a wife, not as a servant, but as a woman, a whole human being. When the judge granted the divorce, I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just closed my eyes and let the air fill my lungs like a woman who had just walked out of a fire. Charles was ordered to pay restitution. Half of everything, and most importantly, the judge granted me something I never thought I'd get. The right to buy back my home, our home, from the buyer. Apparently, Charles had sold it to a distant cousin. And the judge saw through it. Called it manipulation. Fraud. Carla smiled at me after the ruling. "You're not just getting free," she said. "You're getting whole." And that night, when Anna and I went home, we toasted with tea instead of wine, because my stomach still couldn't handle alcohol. We toasted to something better. To dignity, I said. To justice, she added. And to never being anyone's maid again. I looked in the mirror later that evening. The woman staring back at me looked older. Lines around the eyes. White flecks in her hair. But she was also brighter. Not because of age or makeup or light, but because the weight was gone. I stood straighter. I had won something bigger than a case. I had won myself back. I stepped back onto the porch of the house I once called mine, not as a guest, not as a prisoner, but as its rightful owner. Yes, after months of legal wrangling, tears, and late-night prayers, I bought it back. With the settlement money, with help from Anna, and with courage I didn't know I had. The door creaked open like it had been waiting for me. The light filtered in, catching dust in the air like dancing fireflies. Every corner whispered memories, some painful, some precious. But the most powerful thing I felt wasn't nostalgia. It was power. I walked through the hallway barefoot. No voices barking, no slamming doors. Just the soft echo of my footsteps reclaiming each room. The kitchen where I had cooked 10,000 meals. The living room where silence used to shout louder than the TV. And the bedroom where I used to sleep beside a man who couldn't love without control. Now it was mine. Every inch, every beam, every scar in the wooden floor. This house saw me break, I whispered, but now it will see me heal. I repainted the walls. I donated the old furniture. I bought a second-hand couch in a warm yellow that reminded me of summer and second chances. And most of all, I turned the guest room into my sanctuary. Books, a writing desk, a rocking chair, a place where I could just be. Anna visited often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with flowers, always with love. She brought the kids too. And little Emma, just 6 years old, said something one afternoon that brought me to tears. "Grandma, your house smells like cookies and happy." It didn't matter that Charles tried to take it all from me, because the truth is, he didn't know how to break a woman who had already learned how to rebuild herself. I began volunteering at a women's shelter not long after, helping women who had lived through what I had. Some were young, some older, all broken in different ways. But I would sit with them and tell my story, not to scare them, but to show them that healing is possible, that saying no can be the start of everything. You are not what he did to you, I would say. You are what you choose to become after. They would look at me with wide eyes, like they'd never heard those words before. Neither had I, until I spoke them aloud and realized they were mine. There's something you should know about finding your voice again at 73. It doesn't come back all at once. It comes in fragments, in the way you stop apologizing for speaking, in how you laugh a little louder, in how you stop shrinking into corners and start taking up space again because you finally believe you deserve to be seen. It was a crisp autumn morning when a local women's group invited me to speak. I almost said no. The old me wanted to shrink back, stay safe. But then I thought of all the women who never got to speak, who died in silence, who lived unseen, who went to sleep every night believing their suffering was normal. So I said yes. I walked into that church hall with trembling knees but a steel heart. The room was filled with women, young, old, tired, fierce. And when I told my story about the house, the betrayal, the moment my husband raised his hand to me in front of my grandchildren, you could have heard a pin drop. Some cried, some gasped, and some nodded because they knew. When I finished, I said, "If you think silence will keep the peace, I promise you, it will only cost your soul. And the moment you say no, not only do you save yourself, but you show your daughters and granddaughters what self-respect looks like." The applause didn't matter. What mattered were the women who came up after. One whispered, "I thought I was alone." Another said, "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." One hugged me so hard, I thought she'd never let go. I left that hall feeling something I hadn't in years. Useful, heard, whole. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living with purpose. Back home, I lit a candle on the kitchen table, the same table I once sat at in silence, while insults were thrown across like dishes. Now the light flickered in peace. I made tea. I read poetry. I smiled without effort. One evening, Anna said, "Mom, you're different now. Stronger, happier. Honestly, you're glowing." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. Not because someone told me, but because I felt it in my bones. The woman who once whispered apologies into her pillow was now telling stories that helped other women scream their truth into the world. And every time I told my story, it stitched my soul back together. It was a Sunday. I was baking bread, real bread, the kind you knead with your hands, and fill the whole house with warmth and memory. The house was quiet, peaceful, mine. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there he was, my husband, the man who had once struck me in front of our grandchildren, the man who had sold our home behind my back, the man who had broken everything that was sacred between us. He stood there with a plastic grocery bag and a defeated look in his eyes. "May I come in?" he asked, voice low. For a moment, I was that woman again, small, scared, unsure. But only for a moment. Then I remembered. I was no longer a woman who opened her door out of fear or habit. I was the woman who chose what and who entered her life. So I said, "You can come in, but don't mistake this for what it used to be." He nodded. No argument, no arrogance. Just a tired man holding the consequences of his choices. We sat at the kitchen table, me in my seat, him in the one across. I offered him tea. He accepted. For a while, we said nothing. Then finally he spoke. "I was wrong. I know that now. I thought I was doing what was best. I was proud, stupid, angry. But I never thought you'd leave. When I lost you, I realized I lost the only person who ever truly saw me." He looked old. Not just older, but weary, like shame had been gnawing at his bones for years. But I wasn't here to rescue him. "Not this time," I said. "You didn't just lose me. You gave me away, piece by piece, word by word, slap by slap. But I found myself again, and I like the woman I've become. So whatever you came for, make it quick." He sighed. "I came to say I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say it." I nodded. "You did, and now you can go. No drama, no tears, no begging. Just truth." That moment, it was my closure, not his. Mine. After he left, I sat back down with my tea. Still warm, still mine. And I smiled, because this time I didn't need revenge. I had peace, and that was enough. Weeks passed after that final visit. I never heard from him again. No letters, no calls, no dramatic reappearances. Just silence. And you know what? It was the kind of silence that didn't hurt. It felt like healing. Like the kind of quiet you earn when you've weathered every storm and finally step into your own sunrise. My grandchildren visited more often, not because they were forced, not out of pity, but because they wanted to. We'd sit in the sunroom sipping lemonade, playing cards, or talking about life. And one day, my youngest granddaughter asked me, "Grandma, how did you get so strong?" I almost cried, not because of the question, but because of the tone. She didn't see me as a victim. She saw me as a woman who rose. I told her, strength doesn't always come from lifting others. Sometimes it comes from finally standing for yourself. People may break your heart, take your home, forget your worth, but you don't have to forget it. Ever. She nodded. I saw it sink into her heart like a seed, one that would bloom later, maybe years from now, when she'd need to remember that she, too, had a voice. I began writing. Not a book, not for the world. Just pages for me, for my children, if they ever truly want to know me, for my grandchildren to know what silence costs and how courage repays it with freedom, and for women like me sitting in their homes feeling invisible. If they ever read it, maybe they'd whisper to themselves, "I'm not alone. If she survived it, maybe I can too." I also volunteered at a women's center nearby. Nothing big, just tea conversation, some warm meals, a place for someone to say, "He's hurting me," or "They don't see me," or "I don't know who I am anymore," and to hear back, "I see you," because that's what saved me. Not justice in a courtroom, not revenge served cold, but being seen, heard, believed. One day a woman sat next to me, bruised, heart-trembling fingers. She whispered, "He sold my car without telling me. Now I can't leave." And I looked her in the eye and said, "He might have taken your keys, but not your power. That's still yours." She cried. Then she smiled. And that was the moment I knew. My pain had become someone else's hope, and that's a legacy no thief can steal. You would think that after all this time they'd forget me. But pain leaves traces, and sometimes, so does regret. It was a late autumn afternoon when I got the letter. From my son, the same son who stood there letting it all happen, the same son whose silence hurt more than the blows. It was handwritten, shaky, like his soul was trembling through the ink. Mom, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I saw what he did to you, and I said nothing. I was a coward. I let fear and selfishness steal my voice. I'm sorry. I stared at the words for a long time. Not crying, not angry, just hollow. Because sometimes apologies come too late to heal what's already scarred over. And that's not bitterness, it's reality. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him pain.
But I couldn't go back.
I had built a new truth, a new peace. And sometimes the best closure is knowing you don't need to open that door again. But life has a strange way of echoing redemption. That winter, I was invited to speak at a local women's shelter event. Nothing fancy, just a room full of women with tired eyes and quiet courage. They asked me to tell my story, and I did. I told it all. From the day I lost myself to the day I found her again. From being beaten in front of my grandchildren to walking out with nothing but my name and rebuilding from that name upward. When I finished, the room was silent. Not out of shock, but reverence. Then one woman clapped. Then two. Then all. Afterward, one of them came up to me. She looked like she'd carried decades of storms behind her eyes. You didn't just tell your story, she said. You told mine too. And in that moment, I felt it again. The quiet power of being seen. Not long after my oldest granddaughter gave me a gift. A small wooden box with my initials carved in gold. Inside, dozens of little notes handwritten folded. Each one with a message, you taught me courage. You're my hero. I'll never let anyone treat me like less than I am. You're not just grandma, you're strength in a dress. I held that box close to my heart, and I thought to myself, maybe I had lost a house, maybe I had lost a son. But I had gained something unshakable, a legacy. I wake up each morning now to soft light streaming through curtains I picked out myself. No more yelling from the next room. No more silent dinners with cold stares. No more walking on eggshells in a house that was supposed to be mine. Just peace, quiet, and my favorite tea steeping while I hum my old songs. It's strange, isn't it? How something as violent as being beaten in front of your grandchildren can lead to a life this gentle. But that's what happens when you stop surviving for others and start living for yourself. I learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the stillness. You are enough. You are not too late. You are still here. I still hear from women across the country, some younger than me, some older, all broken in different ways, but all carrying the same question. How did you find the courage to leave? And I always answer the same way. The day I stopped caring if they loved me and started loving myself. Because the truth is, they took my dignity. They took my voice. They even took my home. But they couldn't take me. I came back. Not the same. Stronger. Wiser. And finally free. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever thought you were too old to start over, please listen to me. You are never too old. You are never too small. You are never too late. One moment of self-worth is worth more than a lifetime of silent suffering. And to those who watched it happen and stayed quiet, to my son who looked away, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. This isn't just a story about what he did to me. It's about what I did after. I rebuilt. I healed. And now I shine. Not for anyone else, just for me. So if you're listening to this, whether you're 18 or 80, remember this. They might break your home. They might bruise your body. But they can't touch your spirit unless you let them. And I never will again. Because I'm not just a grandmother. I'm a storm that learned to speak softly. I am proof that pain doesn't get the last word. I am still here.